people who are giving opinions is just that. It's just opinions and speculation. I think he's doing housekeeping right now. I think he's trying to tie up some loose ends. Whatever he's going to do, the die is cast, and it'll probably happen after the first of the year. I suspect there'll be another indictment. The real question is who's going to be in that indictment. Now, you contrast this, Chris, with requesting no prison time for former General Flynn. Does that suggest maybe then that, and we know Flynn, and I think they met 19 times, if I recall properly, maybe he got something there? Because right now, again, there's been a lot of legal action here, a lot of movement, but so far the public hasn't seen anything that speaks to collusion between President Trump and the Russians. Yeah, that's a lot of interviews, and that suggests to me that he had some things to say that were relevant, or at least the special counsel's people felt was relevant. That's way too much investigative time to not have relevant information passed. I always thought that Manafort had very relevant information, and I think he does, and I think there were high hopes that he was going to provide that kind of information and just didn't. I speculate that it is a bit of a tactic on his part to act like he was cooperating so he could feed information into the Trump the attorneys for Trump. Is there anything illegal about that? No. No, okay. When the news sort of broke it, again, breaking news, it felt like, hey, this was something illegal or unethical. So then where do you think we are? I mean, we are now waiting again for the Manafort situation. We know that that's blown to smithereens, a lot of finger pointing already. So to your point, I'm not sure what Robert Mueller's going to get out of it, but what can the American public perhaps get out of this? And the timeline, it feels like this is coming to an end. We just don't know what the conclusion is going to be. Yeah, first, I do think it's going to come after the holidays, whatever the next indictment, if you will, or the report. I don't think the president gets indicted. Of course, you can't indict a sitting president. I don't think Mueller would even try to do that. So there's at least going to be a very lengthy report. We know that the Russians were up to no good. We know that they tried to sow chaos into our election. That's just what they do. That's just what, under Putin, that's a mafia state, and we know that they are not that they are dead set on undermining this democracy. So that's a given. That's been proven. We know that there was some hacking going on, maybe from WikiLeaks. So what hasn't happened is a link between the hacking and the Russians and the Trump campaign. So there's a leap there. There's a gap there. Hold that thought 1 second, because I want to go to David Lee Miller with the very latest on this. David.
Charles, we just received a copy of the sentencing memorandum. I'm still going through it. It's more than 30 pages long, but it spells out what will essentially be disappointing news for Michael Cohen. He and his attorneys had sought no jail time. That is not the case. This document says that it is recommended by the prosecution that he receive 42 months in prison. This for the 2 cases against him, lying for Congress, lying to Congress, and also regarding the 8 criminal counts for which he pled guilty here in the Southern District of New York, related to the payouts to the 2 women that claimed to have sexual relations with Donald Trump. Reading briefly from the court filing, it says that Michael Cohen, quoting now, was motivated by personal greed and repeatedly used his power and influence for deceptive ends. Now he seeks extraordinary leniency, a sentence of no jail time based principally on his rose-colored view of the seriousness of the crimes. He claims to a sympathetic personal history. It goes on to say Cohen did provide information to law enforcement, including information that assisted the special counsel's office in ongoing matters. So very clearly, Charles, what this document does say is that he did help the government in its case, but at the same time, it said not enough so that he should not be punished. He now faces 42 months in prison. This is a recommendation. He will actually appear in court next week on December 12th. Charles.
David Lee Miller, thank you very much. Chris Swecker, thank you very much as well. Folks, a bombshell just now. Michael Cohen not cooperating the way we thought he would. The 5 starts right now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, along with Dr. Nicole Saphier, Marie Harf, Kennedy, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The 5. Fox News alert. We are closely monitoring three huge news stories. First up, prosecutors have made their bombshell filing in the case against ex-Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, recommending, quote, substantial prison time despite his cooperation. We're also awaiting special counsel Robert Mueller's memos on Paul Manafort. This after former FBI Director James Comey just finished speaking to reporters following his closed-door testimony to the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees. Let's bring in Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge to break it all down. Catherine.
Okay, Jesse, we've had a lot of breaking news in the last half hour, so we'll go one step at a time. On the filing for Michael Cohen, as you mentioned, the recommendation is substantial jail time as well as a fine of $500,000. I just want to take a minute here to read some of the filing that has to do with the payments to women on behalf of then-candidate Trump. And what they say is he, Cohen, arranged for the payments through a media company and disguised it as a services contract and executed the second non-disclosure agreement with aliases and routed the six-figure payment through a shell corporation. After the election, he arranged for his own reimbursement via fraudulent invoices for non-existent legal services ostensibly performed pursuant to a non-existent retainer agreement. It continues. This was not a blind act of loyalty, as Cohen has also suggested. His actions suggest that Cohen relished the status of ultimate fixer, a role that he embraced as recently as May of 2018. So the argument they're making is that he has not cooperated to the extent that they had wished, and they're also making the argument that the fraud was a very deep fraud and complex fraud, and a fraud that was perpetrated over a lengthy period of time. We're waiting for another filing from the special counsel, also on this recommendation for sentencing for Michael Cohen, and then, as you mentioned, another filing here in Washington on the issue of the former campaign chairman Paul Manafort. As you remember, Manafort had cut a plea agreement with the special counsel, but prosecutors there alleged that he broke the agreement, that he was not truthful. This is a point that he has disputed. All of this is happening on the same day that we really have an extraordinary and unprecedented situation on Capitol Hill when a former FBI director was under subpoena, tried to fight a subpoena, came up, testified behind closed doors for 6 hours, and we anticipate a transcript could be released as early as tomorrow. The key thing here is that Director Comey is going to come back in a couple of weeks. Republicans have made the case that he did not directly answer their questions. There's a dispute over why, but Republicans say a government lawyer was shutting down their lines of questioning. Democrats say that this was very legitimate because of the ongoing investigations. Let's listen to that first piece of sound from the former director.
Director, the Republicans came out and said that a government lawyer sort of ran interference and shut down specific lines of questioning. Did that happen? And if so, what topics were not discussed?
Why don't you read the transcript, and I think you will not see that happening.
In addition, Fox News was able to ask him a question about this anti-Trump dossier. This is the research that was funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. And if you look at the surveillance warrant paperwork, you can see from the redactions that this was a significant element of the surveillance warrant application just a few weeks before the presidential election for Trump campaign aide Carter Page. Republicans have alleged that this was not credible information, that it should never have made it into the surveillance warrant application. We put that issue also to Director Comey a short time ago.
I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI. I think the notion that FISA was abused here is nonsense.
As a private citizen, how do you think Bob Mueller's investigation is going?
As a private citizen, as someone who knows the justice system, I see it proceeding incredibly quickly and very, very professionally. The most important indication of that is you don't know anything about it except when he files something in court, and that's the way it should be.
You really can't emphasize enough how extraordinary this session was on Capitol Hill to have a former FBI director under oath for a transcribed interview and for an agreement to allow the public release of that interview within 24 hours. On the way out of the session a short time ago, the Republicans said that they would speak publicly, but only after the transcript has been released. And the great thing is that folks at home can read the transcript and they can decide whether the former director was forthcoming about the Clinton email investigation, as well as the Trump-Russia collusion investigation, or whether there was unfair interference by a government lawyer to try and tamp down or shut down their lines of inquiry. Jesse.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much for that great reporting and the questions of James Comey. Stick around, though, because we're going to bring you back in a little bit. We're going to bring in Special Report's Brett Baier to discuss some of the issues surrounding Michael Cohen. So, Brett, welcome to The Five. I just had a quick question. So they're recommending a substantial amount of prison time for Michael Cohen, and the age range for the sentence was, around 5 years. Was that 5-year recommendation, was that strictly based on a campaign finance violation, or were there more things that had gotten Cohen in trouble?
There's a long list. What's interesting, Jesse, is that there are two different recommendations, really. One is from the Southern District of New York that was dealing with all of the charges that deal with payments and the operation with the Trump organization. And then the second filing is from the Mueller Special Counsel Office. They suggest that he cooperated more than the Southern District of New York does. They recommend a lighter sentence. And then you have the other filing that's coming out, which we haven't seen yet, and that is the Manafort filing. But let me just go back to the Southern District of New York. And that is, they detail the cooperation. They essentially say it wasn't as great as everybody thought, and they are recommending, as you mentioned, this substantial sentence. Read this part. Cohen's criminal violations of federal election laws were stirred, like his other crimes, by his own ambition and greed. During and after the campaign, Cohen privately told friends and colleagues, including in seized text messages, that he expected to be given a prominent role and title in the new administration. When this did not materialize, Cohen found a way to monetize his relationship with and access to the president. Goes on to say that bank records reflect that he made more than $4 million before contracts were terminated. They go on to say that Cohen had these monthly invoices he sent to the Trump organization, the company, for $35,000 payments, falsely indicating that these invoices were being sent as a retainer. The company then falsely accounted for these payments as legal expenses. These are the payments to pay off some of those women that we've talked about and their allegations.
Yeah, it's curious to see what the president's exposure here is going to be legally, considering this happened before he became president. We're going to take it around the table. Kennedy.
Hi, Brett. Nice to talk to you. So there was one aspect of the filing where it said in some of Michael Cohen's text messages that he had expected a plum role in the administration. And I'm wondering if somehow his hubris and narcissism were absolutely repellent to special counsel.
Yeah, it seems like that. At least the Southern District of New York here. We're just looking at the Mueller filing, Kennedy, and this is separate. Again, we've got three things going on here. In addition to Comey testifying, we've got the Southern District of New York, the special counsel details, and then the special counsel on Manafort and why they think he's lying to them. Mueller contends that Cohen lies to Congress, concealing the Trump Tower Moscow deal, could have made Trump's company hundreds of millions of dollars from Russian sources. And this goes into what we've talked about before, and that is the thought of a Trump Tower in Moscow. Cohen alleging that he lied to Congress, saying that this project was in the works and continued to go and be talked about well into 2016.
Are they intimating that the project was illegal?
No. They're just saying that he lied about it before Congress in what we've seen, and that it was still going forward. But you get to the heart of the matter here. And this is what the president has tweeted about. Is it legal or is it not? He was a businessman looking for opportunities, and did he do something illegal by talking about a project? where the complication comes is how it strings together with the other Russia part of the investigation. And we don't see yet in this document that detail of where the Mueller probe is heading on that front. And again, I haven't seen the Manafort document as of yet.
All right, Marie.
Brett, put the Cohen filing into context of everything else that's happened this week, and as you mentioned, the Manafort filing, which we're still waiting for. We had the Flynn sentencing memo that included a lot of redactions, but a lot of information about his cooperation, the fact that he had been cooperating on 3 separate investigations. Now the Cohen memo, and now we're still waiting on Manafort. Put that all into context for the kind of week the president's looking at on the special counsel particularly.
Maria, I just don't think we know yet. I think the Flynn filing, if you listen to people who really cover this very closely, like Michael Isikoff and others, who say, I think there are a lot of people who are reading too much into it, even though you don't know what the redactions obviously are behind the redactions. But it's very well possible that they could be involved in other crimes dealing with other people and other lobbyists and the FARA rules. So again, we don't know on that front. As far as these filings, the most damning thing, I think, so far, reading through them, is the payments. And, you know, whether you characterize those as a campaign finance violation and where that all goes. But as far as Russian collusion, I've sifted through 40 pages so far, and I have not seen anything along those lines.
Okay, Greg.
Yeah, I feel like the news just threw up on me. There's like too many. It's impossible to focus on what is like what. And so I think what you just said is the key thing, is that this was supposed to be about something else, which was this mythical beast that the media was going to slay, which was collusion. And instead, what we are is we've got these complications and these documents and these details, and we still don't know what's legal and what's illegal. Yet, I'm sure for the media, this will feel like Christmas.
Yeah, and I mean, campaign finance violations, they're a legitimate concern, and they're, you know, it's their laws, obviously, but if you are talking about substantial evidence of collusion with Russia, so far I am not seeing anything that references that in these filings. Now, let's see what the Manafort filing says. But you're right, Greg. I mean, it has been a lot of talk about what possibly could come, like it is a very exciting moment. So far, this is like Chinese food for those folks. I mean, they may want to have a little bit more food because they just don't have enough information here. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Do you have a quick question for Mr. Baer, Nicole?
I do. Hi, it's Nicole Sapphire. I have a quick question for you. So can you explain to us a little bit more? Resign to run laws are not applicable in the private sector. So, you know, what we were kind of wanting to see here was talk about the collusion, but we didn't get that. But for the folks that are getting all worked up over campaign finance issues, so if resign to run laws are not applicable to the private sector, why would Cohen lie about the potential relationship, other than just that it may open up the president's campaign to blackmail, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was going to happen. It's just all summation, and, you know, it's just, you know, supposition of things that may not happen. Is this just a media tactic?
You know, I don't know if we can get to his motivation for lying about it. Obviously, the campaign had been asked about ties to Russia, and there had been denials from the candidate. After that, you know, it seemed like it had all finished, and so that Trump Tower plan had gone further than anybody thought it was, if you believe Cohen's testimony the second time to the special counsel. The legality of whether that could happen or couldn't, you're right. I mean, there's a question of it's legal. Obviously, he was a businessman at the time. But how it fits into his answers about his dealings with Russia later, after he gets elected, I think that's, you know, what everybody's hanging their hat on.
All right, Brett, thank you very much. We're going to stick around and catch you at 6 o'clock. Special report, got a big hour. All right, let's bring in John.
We will digest more.
Roberts, of course, a lot more. John Roberts from the White House. All right, John, what is the reaction down there in your neck of the woods?
Well, we haven't gotten any new reactions specifically to the sentencing memo that Mueller's Office of Special Counsel put out, but, you know, we do have statements in the past a few days about this. President Trump suggesting that Michael Cohen lied to try to get a lenient sentence, and that Michael Cohen, in fact, deserves a long sentence. And it looks like that is what he is going to get. The Office of Special Counsel recommending a modest reduction from the guidelines 51 to 63 months. It's interesting, too, that it's almost in a mocking tone of legalese that the special counsel's office goes after Michael Cohen's request to have no jail time, saying that the effect of this on his family, the loss of his law license, the loss of his business is punishment enough, and that he should be credit time served and not go to jail at all. The special counsel's office basically said, well, that's not the case. Your crimes were substantial and you deserve to go to jail for some time. So I would imagine if and when we hear something from the president or his legal team, I've reached out to Rudy Giuliani to see if he's got something to say about this, because he certainly had something to say about the Michael Cohen guilty plea a short time ago, that we'll hear something along the lines of Cohen is getting what the president and the president's legal team believe he deserves. Jesse.
All right, John, since the payment to Stormy and this other woman, they were not out of the campaign. These were payments made by Donald Trump, the citizen at the time. Can he argue that this was not campaign related and therefore it's not a campaign expenditure? And, you know, this is something he was doing to protect his personal life, and people spend a lot of money. Jamie, just because it happened right before the election doesn't make it necessarily related to the election and necessitate a FEC filing.
Well, here's the great thing about the United States. You can argue anything you want. Whether or not it flies is another question. I mean, this is an argument that the president has made, is that this was a personal matter. It wasn't a campaign donation. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and the district judge there begged to differ, to say that this, in fact, was an illegal campaign contribution on Michael Cohen's part, but they didn't tie it specifically to the president, though they did seem to indicate that the president had knowledge of this and that was cooperating in the efforts to silence Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. So, again, whether or not this could legally be tied to the president, I think, is a matter of some debate. There's the Justice Department memo from the 1990s that says that a sitting president cannot be indicted, so they might not have even tried. But certainly they suggested that the president knew all about this, and regardless of what he or his counsel might argue, that this does constitute an illegal campaign donation, and as such, making false statements about it and doing it, Michael Cohen deserves some time behind bars.
All right, Marie.
John, in one of the documents we got from the Southern District of New York today, it outlines some of the assistance that Michael Cohen has been providing to the special counsel. We know he's been in many hours of interviews with the special counsel, and it doesn't give details, but it talks about Michael Cohen giving information about certain Russian nationals who are trying to reach out to the campaign and have, quote, synergy with the campaign. Not a lot of details about the Russian aspect, but some breadcrumbs that I think have been left here in this filing. What, if any, response have you gotten from the White House yet, or what do you expect them to say about some of these Russian insinuations in this filing today?
I think we have not gotten anything from the White House, first of all, on this, or from the president's outside legal team, Rudy Giuliani or Jay Sekulow. But I imagine, and if we heard something from Sarah Sanders in the next 30 seconds, I think that you would probably hear all of them say in a chorus worthy of A Christmas Carol, there is no evidence of collusion here that is demonstrated. That, you know, Michael Cohen may be talking about some contacts with Russians, but there's still no evidence of collusion. That's been their story all along, and it's a story they're sticking to. What might be more interesting to see than the Michael Cohen sentencing memorandum and the attached addendum to that is what comes out in the Manafort case, and whether or not that is as heavily redacted as the Michael Flynn one was, because that might seem to have some information that might be more relevant to this idea of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russians in terms of trying to influence the outcome of the election. But again, the mantra all along from the White House, from the Trump campaign, from the president's outside legal team has been there is no evidence in any of the things that we have seen so far of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia to throw the election.
All right, John, thank you very much.
You bet.
All right, let's bring in Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law professor, constitutional scholar, who's been following this special counsel probe pretty closely. All right, Mr. Dershowitz, You've seen the memorandum, the filing on Cohen. What jumps out at you specifically?
I think there are two possibilities. One, that Cohen hasn't really provided them very much or hasn't been completely cooperative. Or two, that by recommending a very, very harsh sentence, they're putting more pressure on Cohen, maybe to come up with even more information, because the government has the power to get the sentence reduced afterward if they can tell a court that there was cooperation. So right now, it does not sound like it's good news for Mueller. It doesn't sound like in Cohen they have found a witness that will give them the key to the kingdom. So far, the only solid evidence that he has provided is the campaign contribution issue, and it's a very, very weak case because a president is entitled to pay off women in order to help his family, help his brand. And even if it was to help the campaign, remember the timing, that he wouldn't have had to file anything until after the election. So I think many courts would say no harm, no foul. Even if he had filed it after the election, it wouldn't have had an impact on the election. So the campaign contribution case is an extraordinarily weak one. The evidence of him maybe wanting to build a tower in Moscow, that's not a crime. It's not collusion. If the president or somebody offered Putin, as some people have suggested, a penthouse on the top of the building in order to get a license to build the building, that would be different under the Federal Corrupt Practices Act, but I've seen no evidence to support that quid pro quo.
All right, Kennedy has a question.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the cooperation, why there is less for the Southern District of New York than for special counsel, and what Robert Mueller, how he reached Michael Cohen and what he might have offered him, and whether or not he sort of yanked the rug out, because this memorandum from special counsel talks about the 4 ways that Cohen was helpful in regards to Russia, his own contacts, Russia reaching out to the campaign, Russia reaching out to Trump executives, and his response to congressional inquiry. Why less cooperative for New York than Mueller?
Well, first of all, it really gives everybody a caution. Cooperating with the government is an extraordinarily risky act because the government has too much control. In the Manafort case, they don't like what he said, so they're going to say he hasn't been cooperating, he's been lying, deal is off. Here, they can say, look, he's given us this information, but still we're going to recommend a harsh sentence. I think it sends a message to potential cooperators, be a little bit wary of cooperating with this special counsel, because in the end, you may not get very much in exchange for your cooperation.
All right, as someone who would never cooperate with the federal government, Mr. Greg Gutfeld.
You know that's for certain. Hey, Professor, I think what I've learned from all this is that if you're going to work in a political campaign, you better hope you lose, right? Because if you win,
well, you know,
there'll be a trap set for you in which the whole trap is designed to ask you so many questions that you're bound to lie on 1 or 2 of them. If I would never take a government job because I'm going to lie.
Well, if I was your lawyer, I wouldn't let you lie. But, you know, I hope that Hillary Clinton won for a lot of reasons. First, because I thought she'd be a great president. But second, if she had won, and they were going after her, and I were defending her the same way that I'm defending Trump's civil liberties, I'd be the hero of Martha's Vineyard. They'd be putting up statues to me. Making exactly the same arguments to Hillary Clinton would make me the darling of the liberals instead of the pariah of the liberals, because the same arguments are now helping the demon president. So, you know, you're absolutely right. If you win, they're going to go after you. And so, you know, maybe losing is better.
But that's why, I mean, that's why you're respected, because you are consistent on either side. You would do the same thing.
I would, yeah. But I'm also hated for that because people want me to be on their side.
Great people can be hated.
Red Sox, Yankees, you can't be both on the Red Sox and the Yankee side. You've got to pick a side.
Amen. It's true. Pick the Yankees.
All right, Professor, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're now going to go to Catherine Herridge, who's still down there on Capitol Hill. Catherine, do we have you?
Yeah, just I'm coming right back.
Sure.
Right,
Okay.
stand by 1 second. I was just working on 6 o'clock. You know how it goes.
I understand.
Okay, so,
I totally understand the pressure.
Okay.
Dr. Nicole Saphier has a question for you.
We're back. Okay.
Hi, Catherine.
Okay, go ahead. Shoot.
Nicole Saphier. Thanks
Hi
for
there.
being with us tonight and being available for all of our questions. So I have a question for you, and
You
it's
bet.
a little off the cuff, but Cohen has had historically problems with truth and greed. I think everyone can kind of say that. And so just because that he
Right.
cooperated with the investigation, I don't know why people are surprised that they're still recommending sentencing. It's a less variance than
Right.
the recommendation, but he committed crimes. He admitted to it. So yes, he needs to undergo sentencing. But my question, as Marie said earlier, there were some crumbs that were dropped recently about some Russians who potentially reached out during the
Right.
campaign. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that doesn't parallel with collusion with President Trump. That just
Right.
means that there was potentially communication. But how do we know in itself it wasn't Cohen? We know that he has actually reached out to people. He's wanting to consult for money.
Right.
He reaches out to other people trying to get monetary
Right.
gains for himself. Could he not also have done that with Russia?
Right. Yes, so I've just got the section right here. We're on the air still.
Yes.
Got to put the light back on. It's really
Beautiful.
moving targets today up here on Capitol Hill. Anyway, I don't think that's ever happened to me before, but it happens every once in a while. Okay, so here we go. I think the point number one is that Cohen is someone who has an admitted track record for lying. The issues are fraud, in many respects, seeking financial gain for himself, right? So you're saying how credible is he? The breadcrumbs that you were referring to that are buried in the filing are right here. It says the defendant also provided information about attempts by other Russian nationals to reach the campaign. Cohen provided the SCO, that's the acronym for the Special Counsel Office, with useful information concerning certain discrete Russia-related matters core to its investigation that he obtained by virtue of his regular contact with company executives during the campaign. Cohen provided relevant and useful information concerning his contacts with persons connected to the White House during the 2017-2018 period. So it goes to the core of what you're saying, which is that they documented through Cohen that there was outreach by Russians to the campaign during this period, but it doesn't tell us whether it goes to this issue of coordinated or working together or the term that's so synonymous with this now alleged collusion. And I guess I would say, having covered this for so long, I'm not sure it's that surprising because we already know about the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting. This was an effort by the Russians to try and get what they thought maybe an incoming administration to take a sympathetic view of their lobbying issues. So
I agree. I'm underwhelmed.
You
by
have
what's
to
come
look
out.
at these documents as providing sort of a big, broad picture of the scope of the investigation. We learned a little bit more about what Cohen has provided on the Russia piece. I think that's pretty significant. We don't know who these individuals were, who they contacted within the campaign, and what, if any, promises were made and if they were followed through on. Remember, the Moscow real estate project was discussed, but then the deal never went forward.
Right. It does say that some of the Russians were seeking to arrange a meeting between Donald Trump and some Russian officials, and that never materialized. So we can leave it at that. All right, Marie has a question.
Well, Felix Sater admits to that in the emails with Michael Cohen, which have been in the public domain now for several weeks, if not, I think, over a year. I think either the New York Times or the Washington Post first got a handle on the Felix Sater emails. He's the developer who was working with Cohen, and he was trying to get an introduction to Putin's office. But if you look at the emails pretty closely, it looks like Cohen was having a hard time trying to kind of get that entree into senior levels of the Russian government and the president, Vladimir Putin. And so that's the question, really. Did he make those connections, and did it go anywhere? Based on the filing today, it doesn't answer that question for us.
All right, Marie.
Catherine, you've been up on the Hill all day, obviously covering Jim Comey and now the news on Michael Cohen. We're still waiting for the Manafort filing. Have you gotten any reaction yet from senior members on either the Republican or the Democratic side up on the Hill to all of this news today? What are you hearing from members up there?
Well, you know, the timing has not really been with us here, so I don't really want to speculate, because the TikTok here is that just after about 4:15 Eastern, the former FBI Director Comey came out. He talked to reporters. We didn't really hear much from lawmakers after that. Most of them said they were waiting for the transcript to be made public. But what we did hear earlier in the day, and to emphasize that was before these filings were made public, is that they felt it was absolutely essential on the Democratic side that the special counsel investigation be allowed to run its course. Republicans were not so much focused on the Mueller probe. They were more focused on, their core issues over whether there was special treatment for Hillary Clinton during the email investigation by the FBI, and whether there was abuse of the surveillance warrant process against the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. So I don't think timing was really with us on those issues today here on the Hill.
All right, Catherine, thank you very much, and we really appreciate all those great reports. Let's go to Bret Baier, who's been looking over this memo closely. Do you have anything to share about the Russia connection?
Yeah, we found a key part in the special counsel's filing when it comes to Cohen, and this is really the central part where it ties this to Russia, per the special counsel, page 5 through 7, talking about Cohen's cooperation with the government, saying he'd been useful in 4 different areas. First, providing information about his own contacts with Russian interests during the campaign and discussions with others in the course of making those contacts. Detailed account of his involvement in the Moscow project, as we talked about, but also corrected the record concerning his outreach to the Russian government during the week of the United Nations General Assembly. He also received contact information in November 2015 for a Russian national who he claimed was a trusted person in the Russian Federation who could offer the campaign, quote, political synergy and synergy on a government level. He, according to the special counsel, recalled that this person repeatedly proposed a meeting between individual 1, that's Donald Trump, and the president of Russia. The person told Cohen that such a meeting could have a phenomenal impact not only in political but in a business dimension as well, referring to the Moscow project, the Trump Tower in Moscow, because there is, quote, no bigger warranty in any project than consent of the president of Russia. Cohen didn't follow up on this invitation. Secondly, he provided the special counsel with information concerning discrete Russia-related matters, is how it's written in the document here, core to the investigation that he obtained by virtue of his regular contact with the company, the Trump Organization, executives during the campaign. Third, this is interesting, we hadn't heard this part, Cohen provided relevant and useful information concerning his contacts with persons connected to the White House during 2017 and 2018 time period. That's last year and this year. And fourth, Cohen described the circumstances of preparing and circulating his response to the congressional inquiries while continuing to accept responsibility for the false statements contained within it. Now, the circulating the response part is obviously getting some look there, because that would mean circulating what exactly he was going to say and not say under oath with people inside the White House. So that's a key part there. And then there's a footnote on page 4 that says Cohen talked multiple times to individual number 1, Donald Trump, about reaching out to the Russian government. So there you see encapsulated the Russia part of the special counsel's filing.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. All right, Kennedy.
No, you bring up a really great point, Brett. It is Kennedy, because, obviously this is the thrust of the investigation. This is the reason there is special counsel in the first place, and it is the interaction between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, trying to figure out if that non-illegal word collusion actually existed. And although this special counsel memo did a very good job of organizing it neatly into 4 distinct areas, you have to think that, given that this is the crux of the investigation and this is the critical component, and if Michael Cohen had dealings in 4 different areas in regards to Russia, he didn't provide a lot of information, and perhaps the case involving Russia isn't very strong.
We will see. Obviously, they don't detail all that evidence in this document, Kennedy. So it's, as I was mentioning before, going through the Southern District of New York and the special counsel papers at the beginning, the 40-plus pages, it didn't jump out. But then there was this section on Russia, which obviously directly deals with what the special counsel is tasked to do. We don't know what other evidence he has lined up from other witnesses. We really don't know how this all stitches together. But some of this they would not put in this filing unless it was leading to something, or perhaps there was some other element that we don't know about that they're going to come forward with. It does not tell us, Kennedy, as you rightly point out, that he's making the case that it definitively happened, at least not in this document. It says what Cohen told them.
Greg.
I'm overwhelmed by the amount of video of Michael Cohen walking that we have. Good job, everybody. I'm wondering, and I'm waiting anxiously for Donald Trump's tweet on this. I predict he will say, as I said, no collusion, fake news, witch hunt. What do you think his response might be? I think it may be witch hunt, fake news, no collusion. Like a different order. But I agree with you. I think it'll be the same response.
All right, Brett, so when you enumerated these so-called connections between Michael Cohen and Russia.
The special counsel did.
Right, when you read those off from the special counsel's memo. It seems like there's a lot of smoke but no fire. And you said there could be two possibilities. Could one of the possibilities be maybe that the special counsel isn't necessarily leading to the promised land of this major Russia collusion that they have and they're ready to throw out there? Could it be that they're just creating a narrative, not nefariously, but just kind of creating a narrative and putting everything out there on the table without, in the end, having any there?
It's possible. That is one possibility. Understand that this has to, when a final report comes, it goes through the Justice Department. It goes to, if it happens now, to the acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker. If it happens sometime after, likely Bill Barr gets confirmed, it would go to him overseeing the Russia investigation. But these filings don't have to, so they're public already, and they're laying this kind of thread, and that's why you see everybody looking at every word, seeing possibly where it leads. I think what this section told us was that there may be an effort to stitch together an obstruction case, the suggestion of the circulating the response before he makes it under oath, the suggestion of talking to insiders at the White House in 2017 and 2018. You don't know where this is going, Jesse, and unfortunately that's the thing that we've had to say every day with these filings. Even they just give us pieces of the picture. We don't have the whole puzzle.
All right, Marie?
Brett, it feels like with this filing, we've gotten another window into Michael Cohen, who, as we know, for decades has worked for Donald Trump, has a lot of insight into the financial dealings the president has had for many years when he was a businessman. The Flynn filing gave us sort of a window into the National Security Advisor and the campaign national security apparatus. The Manafort filing will probably give us some insight into the campaign manager piece of this. So it feels like a lot of pieces of the puzzle are being put out this week, but we don't know what the whole picture looks like. But each of them represents a different part of Donald Trump's world.
Sure. And I think we're going to learn less because I think that the Manafort filing is going to be under seal. It was supposed to be filed by 5 p.m. I think it's going to be under seal, and that means that it's part of a larger investigation.
Don't they have until 11:59 tonight for the Manafort filing?
The end of the day, but it just posted on the docket under seal. So how much that covers, I don't know yet, Kennedy. But I think you're right, Marie. I think there are different pieces that we're learning here. And what we really can definitely say, is Michael Cohen's in trouble. He's facing some serious jail time. The other one, Paul Manafort, is in trouble. He's facing some serious jail time. And as far as where the special counsel goes, we don't know, but it does seem like it's coming to a head a little bit more.
Nicole.
Hey, Brett, it's Nicole again. I have a question for you. You know, I'm a medical doctor, not a lawyer here, so I'm hoping you can break it down for me and maybe some other people that aren't necessarily understanding. So I'm referring to the footnote that you described on page 4, where Cohen said that he did confer with then Donald Trump, who wasn't president yet, about a potential meeting to gauge Russia's interest, about meeting together, having the two presidents, or the Donald Trump at the time and the president of Russia. But that meeting never actually happened. So, you know, I know that Cohen had been with Trump for a long time. So perhaps was Cohen necessary? Was he saying maybe he wanted to have this discussion for potential financial future if President Trump didn't get elected at that time?
Sure. I mean, listen, you're exactly right. The president said that himself, leaving to Marine One on the South Lawn, saying, remember that there was a good chance that I wasn't going to get elected. He said that to reporters while leaving the White House. And he said, I was doing business. So he could probably say the exact same thing after this filing, that that's exactly what was happening. They were talking about discussions about business. Now, fast forward and you get to the election, and where is that interaction with Russians, you know, after that point where he has kind of laid down the marker and said there is no there. It does not detail exactly when these connections happen. Cohen clearly is talking about his interactions with Russians.
All right, Brett, thank you very much. Everybody can see you in about 20 minutes on Special Report.
Could I make a note that
Yes.
the good thing about what's happening to Cohen, he's making Kevin Hart feel a lot better.
Yeah, it's totally blew the Kevin Hart news off the front page. All right, let's bring back Alan Dershowitz, a constitutional scholar from Harvard, who's had a little bit more time to look at this memo. Mr. Dershowitz, are you learning anything more as you read through this thing?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing a coming attraction, a trailer for the Mueller report, in which, in the end, he is going to lay out a circumstantial case of political sin rather than federal crime.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Right, and it's not just that the Justice Department rules say that you cannot indict a sitting president. It's that he's not going to find any crimes. Let's take the concept of collusion. The president says there's no collusion. But even if there were evidence of collusion, even if there was a deal made between the president and Putin, Vlad helped me get elected president, and I'm a good president. You know, I don't favor sanctions. You'd be better off having a president who doesn't favor sanctions than a president who does. That would be a terrible political sin. But I can search up and down the federal statutes, and I cannot find a crime.
What about people say conspiracy to defraud the United States? Would that fall into a category of collusion type of deal?
There is no such crime. It's an absurd notion that you can commit a conspiracy to defraud the United States of America by engaging in constitutionally protected campaign activities. You know, liberals and civil libertarians who love to think of themselves as protectors of the Constitution are so prepared to violate their own notions and stretch the criminal law to fit somebody they don't like. What they don't realize is if Hillary Clinton had been elected, the Republicans would be doing the same thing to her. They'd be, oh my God, destroying those emails. That was a conspiracy to you know, you just can't make up crimes. Crimes are on the statute book, and they're there for a reason. They have to be construed narrowly. There's a principle of law known as lenity. If there are two ways of interpreting a statute, a criminal statute, you must interpret it in the way that favors the criminal defendant, not the way that broadens the law. So I think in the end what we're going to see is a report that lays out a lot of sins, alleged sins, lays out some activities which Americans won't be happy with, but in the end won't find crimes unless they stretch the law to fit the crime. Let's remember one other thing. Witnesses like Cohen can be used in a report because they'll never be cross-examined. If they were ever put in a court of law, they would be devastated on cross-examination. The same thing in Manafort, because these are all admitted liars. And you can't use an admitted liar as a credible and effective witness in an actual trial, but you can use them in a report, which is why it is so essential that both sides get a chance to respond and have their reports issued simultaneously.
Right. And go ahead, Kennedy.
Yes. Alan, in the sentencing memo from the Southern District of New York, they talk about Cohen's greed. They talk about his pattern of deception, which is something you just alluded to, and the difficulty in a court of law and having this be a believable witness. But what I found interesting was they said that he is not a cooperating witness and was not given a cooperating witness agreement. But it seems as though Cohen was operating as though he had such an agreement.
Of course, and you don't need an express agreement. What you need is an implicit agreement, a nod of the head. If you're cooperative and if you give us information, we will reciprocate and we will give you a benefit. Obviously, he didn't give them enough of a benefit to justify a substantial reduction of sentence, and it sounds now like he'll get certainly more than 2 or 3 years, maybe as many as 4 years in prison. It just shows how risky it is to be close to a man who gets elected president and who's very, very controversial. Virtually everybody who's been close to the president and the candidate is in trouble. And, the trouble is largely of their own making. They were not always the most honest and honorable people, but they would have lived their lives out had they not been close to this president, because the special counsel is obviously determined to.
And you have pointed out that the indictments.
Ellis, who presided over the Manafort case, said not only do these witnesses sometimes sing, but sometimes he can compose. That is, they improve the story to get a better deal.
And you have pointed out that the indictments and the pleas that have come down in this case have all materialized after the introduction of Robert Mueller as special counsel, that no one essentially has been charged with something that happened between the time that Donald Trump announced his candidacy for president and when Robert Mueller was appointed as special counsel.
Yeah, with a few exceptions, the Russians, but nobody is going to actually get the Russians into the jurisdiction of the United States. Some of the financial cases, but the only thing relating in any way to the president's campaign is the very weak campaign contribution argument. But for the most part, it's been lies that have been told after the special counsel got appointed. And he wasn't appointed in order to get people to lie. He was appointed to try to uncover actual crimes committed in the past before he was appointed. And by that standard, he has not been a success up to now. We have to wait and see and keep an open line to see whether or not he comes up with something in the report, which we haven't seen yet.
Mr. Gutfeld.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, if we're talking about hush money to paid for by an outside source, if that's the issue, what about the taxpayers paying hush money?
Well, the taxpayers are paying for prosecutors. The interesting thing about prosecutors is they actually make money because although it costs a lot to have prosecutors, they tend to get a lot of fines and a lot of forfeitures, and prosecutors often operate at a profit. So I don't think that's as big an issue as some people try to make it out to be. I think the bigger issue is the fact that they have so much power. Let me tell you an interesting thing. If a defense lawyer or the president were ever to talk to a witness and say, look, if you give me good evidence that I can use, I will give you a benefit, they'd be in jail in a second. That's called witness tampering, and it's called obstruction of justice. But prosecutors can do that. Prosecutors can go to people and offer them an enormous amount. They can offer them money, freedom, life, if you give us good information. And there was one court, gutsy enough, about 10 years ago, a case called Stapleton, where the court said, that's a bribe, too, when the prosecutors do it. The statute says anyone who offers a witness anything of material value in order to influence their testimony is guilty of a crime. Unfortunately, that very wise decision was overruled. And so now prosecutors can do what defense attorneys can't do, can offer material benefits in order to get witnesses to give them evidence favorable to their side.
All right, Mr. Dershowitz, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Bring in